I'm so happy to be here for this panel specifically. Every once in a while, a show comes along that's like lightning in a bottle. And in this session, lightning struck twice. Both Adolescence and Squid Game not only achieved artistically and captured the zeitgeist, they also have redefined the possibilities of the entire medium and created a truly worldwide impact. So I'm very excited to bring to you these creators. First, we'll have Adolescence, which is already Netflix's third most watched English series of all time, and it only came out in March. Just as significantly, the show is being discussed in the halls of Parliament, in British schools, and in 10 Downing Street itself. So talk about impact. Please join me in welcoming co-creators, writers, and executive producers Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne. Stephen, you were inspired, by a spate of incidences in Britain involving crimes committed by young boys. But I wanted to know, obviously you collaborated with Jack in the This Is England series of miniseries. What made him the right partner for this project?
I've worked with Jack six times.
Sixth.
And Jack has the most beautiful ability of writing the human condition and constructing characters that have many different aspects of their personality, and he's just the most wonderful writer I have ever had the pleasure of speaking their words. And plus, he's a lovely fella, and he's one of my best mates, do you know what I mean? And I just knew that if this thing was going to come off the ground, there was only Jack that could write it, so there was no hesitation.
The next key collaborator then on the team, I think, if I'm thinking my order right, was another former collaborator of yours, director Philip Barantini. I think anybody who's seen Adolescence knows that in addition to the writing and the performances, which honestly alone would merit all the accolades it's received, on top of that, you two have chosen the really audacious device of filming every episode as a oneer. So I'm wondering, did that just sort of automatically come as a result of the work that Philip and your DP, Matthew Lewis, have done? And how did that choice enhance this story that you wanted to tell?
We knew we were going to do it in one shot because we'd already done a film called Boiling Point, which was a little independent film. Thank you very much. It was a little indie film, and basically, look, it started off as a favour for a friend, if I'm honest, and then I'll get straight to that bit. But it was Phil wanted to become a director, and Matt had an idea to do a one-shot short film. So we did that, and that was Phil's calling card. I give it to my agent, and then she sent it round the office, and 2 days later, Phil had an agent. And then his agent went, well, why don't we turn this into a feature? And we did. And the next minute we were sat at BAFTA. And then what happened, fast forward a few years later, and Jeremy Kleiner from Plan B got in touch with Phil and said, look, I'd love you and Stephen to collaborate and come up with a show, a television show. So I said, I don't want to do that, but I want to do this idea that I had. And then I got in touch with Jack. So you knew it was going to be one shot.
Exactly. It was always written as one shot. The vocabulary of the show, the vocabulary of the way we wrote it was very specific to suit that one-shot format.
It's fascinating because, when you're doing a one-shot, I imagine there's different challenges with doing a one-shot feature versus a one-shot series. And one thing that impressed me about Adolescence is every episode, the scope changes, and so, for example, with episode 2, which is just up and down the hallways of the school, and that's a lot of choreography, I imagine, and coordination. And then episode 3 is a bottle episode, which, maybe physically, is less running around, but, there's a different challenge there. Can you guys talk to me about what were the different, how did this one-shot decision affect your role as producers? How much extra prep was needed? Does it change, how does it affect the expenses, of the series to do something like this?
Well, first and foremost, to answer your first bit, rhythmically, we needed to write it differently each episode because we needed to give an audience a different feeling because each time we were delving into a different aspect of the problem, and the problem was, who made Jamie Miller? Why did this happen? In terms of the logistics of how it got put together, a lot of that is down to the dedication of Matt and Phil. And what Matt and Phil can do is extraordinary. And I'll give you an example. In episode 2, I kept writing us going to the murder scene, because I really felt like it was important to geographically place the school close to the murder scene, and to see how much that the school existed in the shadow of Katie's death. And it just felt to me as a writer like, this is something that really mattered to us. And so I was writing all these different ways, and Matt was coming back to me each time going, the trouble is you can write that shit, but if you put that on telly, it'll look like a computer game. That as soon as the camera is separate from a person, as soon as the camera is separate from a character, it loses its power.
It has reasons to move.
Exactly. And then it was like, and then I kept going, well, what about if it's this thing? And then what about if it's this thing? And then eventually Phil phones me up and goes, Matt thinks he can make the camera fly. And so it was like, okay. And suddenly, he said, if the camera flies, it's not a computer game, it's something else. And then the journey that went on is, it wasn't until shoot week that Toby Bentley, who was one of our execs at Netflix, said, we need Stephen in this episode. We need the gravity that Stephen provides as Eddie to take us home at the end of this episode. So, can you land that drone? And can you establish on Steve, and can you tell the end of that story? And the brilliance of our team is they're incredibly prepared all the time. And because they're so prepared and so brilliant, they found a way to do that in the space of 24 hours. And then by the end of the episode, Stephen was there, with his flowers doing the thing.
But the other thing with that is we only ever had one complete take. And that one complete take was the final take, because the weather and everything. So all of those different aspects that you have to take into consideration. And like I said at the beginning, I knew there was only one person that could write this. But I also knew there was only one production company that could produce it properly. For me, personally, and that was Mark Herbert and all of the wonderful team at Warp. Because again, we've worked with Warp many times, and I knew Mark had the infrastructure and that kind of crazy lunatic dedication that it takes to be a kind of maverick producer. And Mark and his team have that. And if you look logistically of where we filmed, we found a wonderful unit base, didn't we?
Yeah, Production Park,
which is in a little tiny place called Pontefract, which is in the middle of, it's kind of just...
It's just outside of Doncaster.
Just outside, which everyone goes, well, where's Doncaster? Exactly. We thought it was in Wales because it was Pontefract. But what we found with that, you see, and that's where that's where the beauty of the production came into it, because what we also found was we had a school which was just up the road. We had a wonderful housing estate. And what we did then is the whole team as a collective, from the very beginning, we went and met the headmaster. We went to the school. Now, bearing in mind, this lunatic decides to write a fire alarm in the middle of an episode, which has 300 children in it. But what we did as well was we made that community part of it. So the kids that you see, over 150, 200 of those kids, that's their school. So and we go to the place where if a fire alarm goes off in that school, they know where to go. So each child looks like they know where they're going because they know where they're going. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's what we did. We empowered the local community and we brought them in on the journey that we were doing. And look, and I'm being completely honest, it was a unique experience. It was a wonderful experience. And it was the only, look, in our industry, it's a very hierarchical structure that we have. But within this, we kind of ripped the rule book up and threw it out the fucking window because everybody had a right to be there. Do you know what I mean? And if you empower your crew and you empower your team, you get wonderful stuff. And all the cast became the crew, and all the crew became the cast. I mean, Sarah, it's simple. It's simple. It's meditative. You know, it's not socialism, but it's bordering. It's not socialism. It's just empowerment. It's empowering everybody to be there. And our AD team were absolutely outstanding. Outstanding. When you think of the logistics that go into something like that, Sarah was like she was like a football coach and a major in the army. She was amazing, wasn't she?
Yeah, and for all the crew, the performers get a lot of credit, the writers get a lot of credit, the Matt's amazing cinematography gets a lot of credit. I tell you, I think what the hardest job on that show was the sound team.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, capturing all that they captured, and they did so many clever things, miking up walls and building different things so that everything was covered. We in episodes 3, we relayed the entire floor because it was making too much noise for the sound team to do it, and we did it overnight one night because it was just causing too much. So it was just everyone working together. We had a thing that, me and Stephen weren't the authors, everyone was an author.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And everyone shared authorship, and everyone took responsibility for the telling of the story.
And the beauty of it as well is how we work is, if you imagine that first week, if you go from, let's say episode 1, that first week we have the family in the home in the living room. We didn't leave the living room, did we, for like 4 days? So you had all of us with the writer, which is a unique opportunity. Jack and Phil and myself and my daughter and my son, and we sat in that room and we just spoke about being a family for like 3 or 4 days and the relationships that we developed. And Matt has already meticulously worked out the journey with Phil and with Sarah. So like 2 months before we even shot that, they were in Sarah's little Fiat Panda, driving from the house to set with a stopwatch, going, we'll have to go a little bit quicker, or how are we going to get past these? And we couldn't switch the traffic lights off.
Yeah.
It was illegal for us to switch the traffic lights off. So we had to come up and we had to wait and we have to go, it's gone green, and then we'd go. So all of those little tiny logistics were pre-worked out before we shot. But then the second week, it becomes a wonderful choreography. So we all become involved in the movement of how the camera is going to work. Yeah. And then the third week, what we do is, the unique experience of it is, and you'll all go, we only do 2 takes a day. You do 1 take in the morning, and then obviously everyone relaxes and we prep for the afternoon, and you do another take in the afternoon. And for some strange reason, it seems that every episode you see, apart from the first episode, is the final take. So I think for episode 2, it was...
Episode 2, it was take 16, I think. And then episode 1, it was take 2. And then episode 3, it was take 11 or 12. And then episode 4, it was take 14.
Take 14. Yeah. Take 14 on episode 4.
I mean, I'm flabbergasted. That's the word for it. But I think also, there's, because of all of that technical craft that goes into play, what is very incredible is that there's not a bit of emotion that is lost in the storytelling. And do you feel like that actually made it easier to dial in because you've just done so many run-throughs? Emotionally, is that easier? Or
as an actor, it's making it fresh every time. That's our duty. Do you know what I mean? It's making it think. It's portraying to the audience that this is the first time I've had the thinking of these words. Mm-hmm. But what that gave us the power to do as well, with it, especially having Jack on set and myself for those first 3 days, you really get to understand the subtext of what you're saying and why you're saying it. And then it's just a case of playing. And what it does is it marries both mediums beautifully, because you have that spontaneity and energy of theatre, which we all love, but you have that beautiful naturalism and minimalistic kind of reality of film and television. So you get to marry both mediums, don't you?
And there were no day players in this show. There were no people that turned up for 1 day. Everyone who worked on this show worked for a minimum of 2 weeks, every actor. And that meant that every actor was completely in control of their character and completely ready for any moment that occurred, and it just meant that you got wonderful performances. One of my favourite moments on set was when Stephen stopped us all when we were rehearsing the fingerprint scene in episode 1, because the lad that was doing the fingerprints was really brilliant.
It's fantastic.
And Stephen just stopped everyone and went, "You're brilliant! You're brilliant!"
Because I love acting. I'm a fan of acting. Look, and I don't. Do you know what I mean? That's why I do it. It's why I wanted to be an actor. And to be completely honest with you, I've been number 73 on a call sheet. And sometimes you're fucking made to feel like you're number 73 on a call sheet. But with respect of what we did, even if you were number 73 on a call sheet, we made you feel like you were number 1. Yeah. Because that's what it should be, do you know what I mean?
I gotta say here that a lot of times people use the excuse that's like, you don't understand, as a film set, I'm too stressed to be kind. I'm too stressed to be empathetic. And if they could pull that off on this production, I don't think people have an excuse to be humans. Gosh. Netflix announced this show as part of its British slate. It was just about a year ago, I think, that the show was announced. I'm curious, how did the project land there? Did one of you have an overall deal? I know that you've done work with them, or was this a package that was sold?
No, we were in another place with another streamer.
I was trying to tease that out. You can say as much as you want.
And it didn't work out at that other place. We were developing it with them for a while, but the only episode they'd asked for was episode 1. But we were aware that this window for Stephen and Phil was coming up, and so what Steve and I did was wrote episode 2 and 3 on spec, so that when we thought that they might greenlight us and then that we could go. They didn't greenlight us, but we then had 3 scripts to take to Netflix. And I'd worked with Anne a lot. Jeremy Kleiner had worked with Anne a lot. Mark Herbert knew Anne. And Stephen had just made this show, Bodies, for them, that had done Gangbusters for them. And so we walked into that room and there was smiles everywhere. And then they'd read the 3 scripts. They really liked the 3 scripts. They asked us what was in Ep 4.
We pitched it.
And then they went, okay, let's do it. And so we got greenlit in the room, and it was literally 2 days after our rejection. So it was kind of beautiful.
Serendipity. And maybe, that's the natural law of the way it was meant to be. And thankfully, these other people did say no, left us for a year hanging on. But thankfully, they let us take the script, which was really, that doesn't happen often. It could have been on a shelf somewhere, do you know what I mean? But I think we were with the person we were meant to be with, and we were with Netflix, who we were also meant to be with, as the natural law and the order of things is.
I'm so thankful that this series exists for all of us.
So we.
One thing that's interesting about both of the shows that are going to be on this panel, you guys and Squid Game, is that both are, it really shows how global television and storytelling is now accessibly. I'm curious about any ways in which this production was, any things that the production was uniquely able to do because of the British system, of making things, or because, you guys have done a lot of stuff in the British industry, but you're here with like this more of a global, US-based global platform. Like, how does that affect the production process?
I love that we're on the same panel as Squid Game, because I love Squid Game. I think it's a wonderful show, but also I think it shows the joy of the particular. And we are a very particular show. And me and Stephen made a show together called Help. That when we were trying to sell it in the US, and it had Stephen in it and it had Jodie Comer in it, and we were told the Liverpool accents are a bit too strong, and people might not be able to go with it, they might not be able to understand it. And this show had no fear about accents or about anything, and we just told our story as well as we possibly could. And because people saw themselves in the particular, they saw the global in the local. It allowed them to catch on, and that's my experience of watching Squid Game. I can feel myself in that situation, and it's a wonderful thing. In terms of the Britishness of it, I think the one thing I would say is I don't think either Stephen or I would describe ourselves as showrunners. And I think showrunning, I think there's some wonderful showrunners in the world, and it's a wonderful thing. But what I like about what we did is it was a group of people working together. And, one person we haven't talked about yet is Joe Johnson, our amazing producer.
Wonderful Joe.
And Joe was the calm light in the middle of it all. I'm an Aura Ring obsessive. I got Phil on the Aura Rings while we were doing this show. Phil's resting heart rate was 48. I was disgusted. In the middle of this incredibly stressful show, this guy was able to stay incredibly calm. And the reason why he was able to stay incredibly calm is because Sarah's heart rate was sky high. I got her doing it, our first, and Joe was living in a yoga retreat on her own every night, meditating because we sent her into hell. She held the weight. She was the Atlas. She held the weight of the whole show on her shoulders, and she is a remarkable, remarkable woman.
And what they managed to do was they managed to take all of that stress and alleviate it away from Phil. And that was the wonderful beautiful Joe Johnson. And also, she needs a shout out, Hannah Walters.
Yes, Hannah Walters.
Hannah Walters is remarkable. She's phenomenal. And her and Joe were the glue, and they really looked after our young cast as well, predominantly. You know, we had a lot of young actors in our show, and so we had a lot of we had an amazing child psychologist.
Yeah.
We had lots of chaperones, and it was just, you know, we made sure that they had a safe space. And it was a joy to be a part of, wasn't it? But I think going back to that, it was a very colloquial drama. But what we did was we made it with love. We made it with care. We were extremely respectful to our subject. And, you know, and I don't want to keep smashing the hammer down, but each piece of the jigsaw was integral. So every single person we met, you know, you felt like you belonged. You had ownership of it. So without each piece of that jigsaw, we would have never had that final picture. And that goes, you know, and I'll be completely honest, that goes from, let's say, Terry, who looks after the facility trucks, do you know what I mean? You make Terry feel great about him doing his job and cleaning stuff and helping him out and asking him, does he want a cup of tea? Or just saying, morning, Terry, how are you? You all feel a part of it, and it's a collective. And it's amazing what you can do as a collective rather than individuals.
Because of the way that Hannah and Stephen run Matriarch, and because that they took that to Warp, and Warp were in huge embraces of it, there are a lot of people who were heads of department for their first time on this job, and they all stepped up. They're all working class creatives. They all stepped up, and they all gave everything.
You only keep what you have by giving it away. Do you know what I mean? In many ways, and in that same respect, you can't do this thing on your own. Making a production is you know, you're not a golfer. It's a team game, and it's a collective of consciousness, and it's a collective of minds that make this thing the best thing that it can be. We're all there because we love what we do.
I truly and deeply hope that everyone can embody these lessons of what you're talking about. I mean, to achieve something that on the screen is so like resonant, but the way in which you built it, you know, you absolutely held to those ethos and those values. I really, you have my deepest admiration and my respect, gentlemen. Can we please give it up one more time for Jack and Stephen? Thank you so much for your time.